Our first speaker will be Jeremy Brecher from the Labor Network for Sustainability and an activist in the Labor Climate Roundtable. Jeremy.
Hi, it's really nice to be with you all. And we probably would have had more, but because it's horrible weather. And it's a little sobering to think that if we had started this 25 years ago when people became aware of the dynamics of climate change, we might have been able to stop it by now. And what we need to have as a perspective today is, can we put the brakes on climate change fast enough so that 25 years from now we're only facing a terrible, devastating impact of climate change, and not one that's twice as bad as that, twice as catastrophic as what's already in the pipeline. And I think that's what we're here today to try to do. How's the sound? Can people hear okay? Yeah. Great. The charge for the people who are going to speak today was what we need for the climate protection movement in Connecticut. And I want to start out by looking at some of the different elements that we need in the movement. So to start with, let me say that different organizations have different roles and different organizational forms, and what we need to do is make that synergistic. It's either we're not at war with each other and undermining each other, but we make the different kinds of activity and the different kinds of organization that are going to be needed, network with each other and recognize each other's distinctive roles. We have two main things that we have to do. We need to change local and state policies and practices right here in Connecticut, and at the same time we have to be part of a national and a global movement, because we need national and global movements in order to halt what is most obviously a global problem. In Connecticut, we need several different pieces. We need, I think, a mass movement, and we saw what the impact of that is and the importance of that is when 400,000 people marched in New York, and hundreds of thousands more in cities all over the world, in almost all of the world's countries. We are a global mass movement. We need to be a mass movement also here in Connecticut. I personally think that a revived Connecticut 350 would be a great thing, that that's a really good thing for us to think about how to do. And I think that we can be networked in the way that 350 works as a network in every town and city and community in the state. There are people who are deeply, deeply concerned about climate change and ready to act and just need a vehicle that allows them to do that. And I hope when we come out at the end of the day today, we'll have much more of the setup to make that possible and make that happen. I think we also need to have an element of direct action and even in nonviolent insurgency. And I just have a book out called Climate Insurgency, a Strategy for Survival, and I got it yesterday, and I've been taught as an author, you're always supposed to hold the book up and show it to the audience. So I am obeying the lore and wisdom of my tribe and showing it to you. And the problem is that the climate protection is bogged down in inertia and barriers large and small, and we need, one aspect of what we need is direct action that shakes things up and confronts and forces all of us to realize that we can't just, send a check once in a while to some good organization, and that's how we meet our responsibilities to protect the earth. And this most often happens in terms of affinity groups And that kind of structure, and I think that in Connecticut we've seen, even in the last month or so, we have had a nonviolent direct action civil disobedience protest against the building of the Spectra pipeline, and I think that kind of thing is going to have to be part of our climate protection movement in all its breadth. The third thing that we need are environmental advocacy organizations. These are the groups with institutional stability, with memberships, with established funding bases, with lobbying and legal experience, and they are the ones who have played a long-term role in alerting us all to climate change, and that remains a critical part of the climate protection infrastructure that we need in the state. Then we need, and sometimes we forget this, a broad public education ongoing campaign, because the public is being constantly, regularly miseducated and misinformed about climate change. They're being deliberately lied to by people who have money to make by lying to us, and we need to constantly counter that. In the group that I've been working with, the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs, which I'll talk about in a minute, we have ongoing education program with trade unions, local unions on climate change. We need to be doing that with religious groups, we need to be doing it with community organizations, we need to be doing it with everyone in the state who needs to be part of the climate protection movement, and that means everyone in the state. We also need what I call virtual think tanks. This is basically a network of individuals and groups, and some of them exist as organized think tanks, but many others are just sort of loosely connected, that can give us the knowledge we need, the analysis, the program, the policy ideas, because once we start getting into something like, well, how are we going to solarize Connecticut? There is tremendously complex dimensions to what's basically a very simple problem, but the actual implementation of it is complex, and the arguments made by those on the other side, although they are fallacious, also require detailed, careful deconstruction and elimination. So that's an important piece of what a movement needs. And the final piece that I want to talk about, and that's the rest of what I'm going to talk about, is how are we on time? Good, okay. So this is the construction of an institutional network for climate protection among organizations that support climate protection, but primarily have other identities and other missions, but we need to draw in and make them be important players in the climate movement. And this is what we've been trying to do with a group called the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs. And let me just ask, see hands, how many people have heard about it, know about it? So maybe a third, okay. So this is a group that was started, I think, 2.5 years ago or so, and it is, at the core of it is the joint leadership by the Connecticut AFL-CIO, the Trade Union Federation for the state, and the Interreligious Eco-Justice Network, which is a interreligious group, several years, how old? 12-year-old group that has drawn together people from many faith backgrounds to be concerned about environmental justice and climate. And it has many other groups that join in with the roundtable, but those two are kind of the backbone organizations. And they are committed to drawing their constituencies and their member organizations into the climate struggle, although they don't expect to become climate organizations per se. but they are organizations that represent very broad constituencies in Connecticut who have agreed that they're going to become part of this common climate movement. And there are three themes that mark what the Roundtable on Climate and Jobs is involved with. Maybe I should take 1 minute and give the backstory and how they got formed. A couple of us, what actually was then the 350 Connecticut, went to see John Olson, who at that time was the president of the Connecticut AFL-CIO, to lobby him to oppose the Keystone Pipeline. He said, if the national AFL-CIO doesn't have a position on the Keystone Pipeline, I don't have a position on the Keystone Pipeline. But why don't we talk about doing something that would make things like the Keystone Pipeline unnecessary, because we had other ways to address our energy needs. And we thought, well, geez, that's something to talk about. And we agreed that we would create an ongoing roundtable. We brought in Joe Uline from the Labor Network for Sustainability, did a workshop, half a day for trade unions and their allies, and that is where the roundtable came from. And we emphasize, first of all, the importance of jobs and a just transition. We need to be able to say to working people, this is not a question of jobs versus the environment. Environmental protection, climate protection is not something that's going to threaten or destroy your job, but on the contrary, we are making a sector of the Connecticut economy that is going to create jobs and protect jobs of workers. We have 50,000 fewer workers at work in Connecticut today than we had before the Great Recession. Most of those people, we should find ways that they can go to work protecting the climate. Second, Connecticut once had a state climate action plan and very detailed plans for reducing greenhouse gas emissions at a rapid rate, rate that was fits what's necessary to protect the climate, and it fits our targets for the Connecticut Global Warming Solutions Act, which include an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And that is now obsolete. We need to renew it. We need to have a new strategy for how Connecticut is going to get to where we need to get. And finally, the Roundtable is involved in a campaign that's the first step of making Connecticut electricity, our electrical system, climate safe. And I'm not going to try to go into the details of it, but the core of it is that the utilities, starting with CL&P, have a campaign to make us pay a 60% increase in the fixed rate for electricity and eliminate a large part of the incentive for people to do energy efficiency and put solar collectors on their houses and all the other things we need to do, because we're still going to have to pay that fixed rate to CL&P no matter what we do to try to lower our electrical usage. And we have a campaign that got a lot of support in the legislature to reverse that policy on the part of the utilities, and we're going to use that as a first step, the opening salvo, if you will, of effort to redirect the whole structure of the electrical system toward a distributed energy grid based on renewable energy that can sharply reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So I'll stop right there, and it's great to be with you all.